So I watched Threads and I'm going to tell you all about it. I don't actually have a name for this segment, but my name is Adam, and I'm on the way to becoming the most prolific reviewer of all time. And to do so, I watch and review whatever I want, basically. And I've been seeing a lot over the past few years of recommendations to watch Threads. And what is Threads, you might be asking? It's a 1984 movie which details the horrors of a nuclear attack and, the literal fallout of what happens after that. It's a British production, so naturally it focuses on what happens in Britain. And for many people, it's considered to be one of the most horrifying takes on it because they talked to scientists, and everything in the movie is based on scientific understandings at the time of what would happen. So people say it's horrifying and chilling and all of that. Is it horrifying and chilling? For me, it's complicated, I would say, because it's weird because when I was watching it, there were kind of two problems I fundamentally had issues with. Because the movie is supposed to be based on this scientific understanding of the results of, thermonuclear. I don't know if you would call it a thermonuclear, but like a nuclear war. Nuclear. I don't know how to say it. It's easier if you say it with three syllables. Nuclear, nuclear. I don't know. Anyway, um, but I think the incidents leading to the war in the film, if you are weird, if you look at it geopolitically, because basically in the movie, what happens, I guess, is there's some sort of coup in Iran, which I guess is backed by the Americans, and the Soviets interfere with this coup because I guess the movie is suggesting that Iran has been taken over by some kind of communist government, and the Americans had a coup against that, and the Soviets were invading from the Soviet Union and from Afghanistan, which they sort of partially controlled at the time. But there's two problems with that. In Afghanistan, there was this civil war that was going on between the Soviet-backed government and I mean, they weren't called the Taliban at the time, although that's what they would become. They were known as the Mujahideen, and they were backed by the Americans. So, first of all, Afghanistan was not a safe place to launch an invasion from. And secondly, and this is probably the more important part, Iran at the time was an Islamic republic like it is today. So, and they had just had a whole revolution, and that revolution was pretty clearly anti-communist and anti-Western. So neither the Soviet Union or the Americans would be directly involved in Iran at this time. And I'm not sure if the Iraq-Iran war was happening around this time or about to start. But so that one thing, and I don't know, maybe it's really petty, but I don't believe that that incident would lead to nuclear war. Maybe it would happen in some alternate reality, maybe an alternate reality where Iran was not an Islamic republic. But then you think about a lot of questions you start to ask, like, well, how did that happen? So I don't know, maybe in 1984, the Islamic Revolution was only about 6 years old, but it was fundamentally a big part of geopolitics because, the Iranian hostage situation and all of that. So that was a weird thing. The other kind of major criticism I have for the movie, um, it's not one, there's actually two major criticisms that I have. The second one I think about is the science of a nuclear winter. I think over the years, scientists have come to the conclusion that if there was a thermonuclear exchange, there's not enough man made objects to cause a nuclear winter because the idea is that there's such a huge level of destruction that it basically pollutes the atmosphere so much that it blots out the sun. And then you have all of the problems of crop failure and stuff. It's like if a volcano erupted And that caused a little ice age or something like that. And I think that they've kind of, I mean, scientists have kind of reassessed that. And like there might be a temporary cooling effect of this exchange, but eventually it would go back to normal. And maybe the atmosphere would cool down anyway because there's no more industrial production, but that's a different question entirely. So I understand why they put it in the movie, but it makes it kind of unbelievable now. And it makes the whole rest of the movie don't make any makes the rest of the movie not make any sense. Then the other part that I have a problem with, and I get why they tried to make it like this because this is basically an anti-nuclear weapon tirade. It's based on science, but it's an anti-war film and it's trying to show the negative aspects of a nuclear exchange, and it does that really well. But I think the thing that it lacks is, for lack of a better term, kind of like a reverse frog situation. There's this classic trope where if you put a frog in water, it's fine, and you can slowly increase the temperature of the water, and the frog is going to stay in the water, and then it's just going to boil to death because, I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's the trope, right? But I think in terms of huge crisis situations, people act kind of in the opposite way. Like they stay in the water and they continue to live, they continue to survive, and then they come out through the other end. Obviously, such a huge catastrophe would probably be the end of civilization as we know it, just because, but just because civilization ends doesn't mean that humanity is done, you know. And this is going to sound weird, but there's no joy in the movie at all. There's no like motivation for these people to keep continuing. And I can understand that there would be these huge negative effects, but there would be people who are trying to survive, right? They're trying to continue. They're trying to go on because it's in the human nature to adapt to any kind of situation, even the most dire. So I think that's lacking in the movie. And maybe a more subtle criticism is the fact that you have it's kind of like a visual, like it's a movie, so it's not exactly an essay, but it's trying to present ideas in a way where you can quickly understand them and there's a little bit of narration. So I think that one other thing would be not exactly uh, accurate. And it's weird to say like this is accurate because it's a hypothetical documentary. It's a documentary about something that didn't happen. So how accurate or inaccurate can you actually get in that situation? I don't know. So it's interesting to criticize because it's a thought experiment, right? And I'm criticizing the conclusions of a thought experiment. So I'm criticizing something that didn't happen, so it's kind of odd. But anyway, I think the one thing that the movie suggests is that the authorities of the British government would continue, like they would have control still over the government, and I think that wouldn't happen. It would be such a shock to the system, especially if in the movie, like in the movie, the response of the civilian authorities and the military authorities doesn't work at all. If they're so incompetent, then, people will just kind of do their own thing and try to survive on their own. Yeah, and then there are some other things that don't quite add up. Like, I know that they say most of the windows in Great Britain are destroyed in the movie, and most of the buildings have holes in them. And in the movie, they don't make any effort to clean up the rubble, which I think they would do. Now, where would you put all of it? That's a good question because it's all radioactive, probably. But I think they would try to make an effort to make things clean and usable again. And some areas probably would be abandoned, like London, I think it would have too much radioactivity to continue, but other areas I think would be recovered. And the other thing that doesn't quite make sense is that there are these, like, I get why they're doing it. They want to make this impact, but it doesn't make sense because there are like these things that seem to still function from the previous society. Like there's a scene with a helicopter, there's a scene with jets that are flying after it. And the radio is apparently still working. Like, how would that work? And then there's this one scene later where some of the children are watching this old videotape and they have electricity. So, how do they have electricity when the movie says there's no communication and all the infrastructure has been destroyed? So, there should be no electricity, no nothing. There's little bits like that where they kind of wanted to show this sort of visual image about the devastation, destruction, all of that, um, but which was more effective than the actual logic of the film. So I think because of the fact that the political premise is wrong, it wouldn't happen like that, especially in 1984 in our reality. That makes the movie less believable for me. And the scientific premise of the movie might have been true in 1984, like according to the scientific understanding, but the nuclear war thing probably wouldn't happen as far as I understand. So that makes the movie not, and it's not the movie's fault, but that makes the movie less believable. The fact that there's no real motivation for any of these characters to continue seems also to make it like, before this catastrophe, the characters are acting in a human way because it's basically cinema verite, realistic cinema, so they're acting in a normal way. It's the style of cinema where you use real people to try to convey your point. And generally, I don't like that style because actors are professionals for a reason, but I think it works in this movie because in the beginning, they're acting normally. There's this couple and they're about to have a baby, and they're having this argument, and the guy says everything will be okay. And after the catastrophe, I think people will still say that, even if things are really, really bad, because, it's human nature to kind of downplay everything because you need to just to survive. So that part is lacking, and that makes the movie worse because you could make that sort of human urge to keep yourself going. You could also make that horrific, right? But that's not there at all. So that's another reason why the movie's not horrifying for me. And then the other part would be there's a lot of things that look good but are not connected to the logic of the movie. They make a cinematic impact, but they don't make much sense actually in the world that's been constructed in the movie. Like, for example, the jet still working, the helicopter still working, and having somehow electricity, even though everything has been destroyed. Okay, but the thing that I want to emphasize at the end, though, is despite all of these things that I said, the movie does kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Because this kind of catastrophe is so far outside the realm of our imaginations that it's like an alien country, right? And we can't really imagine it. There are things in the movie that I think would happen, even though I have misgivings about the whole premise of the movie. I think in a world where food is limited, some people, and in the movie it's the actual British government, but I think the British government would have collapsed, like I said, but every government would collapse. But I think that there would just be a group of people who find weapons and who are stronger than other people, and those people would control the food supply, and then they would control who gets to live and who gets to die. There would be and as in the movie, prostitution for food and all of that stuff. And as in the movie, the island of Britain has been devastated by fallout and radiation. So that's going to have effects on the next generation. Maybe in a few generations, things will get better, but maybe not. Like, maybe if you go 1,000 years in the future, maybe this has had a huge negative effect on human populations and they can't reproduce anymore and the human species goes extinct. Maybe. Who knows? But the idea that the offspring immediately after this event would be mentally damaged, biologically damaged, emotionally traumatized makes sense to me, and that part is horrifying because even though I said before all people would, have this spirit and they'd want to continue, they would want to continue, but could they actually continue in this situation? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Especially on an island that is so urban like Great Britain. It might just be a lost island, but there might be places where people could survive, like in Alaska or Siberia or in the middle of the outback in Australia, like in Mad Max. So I'm going to say, as a rating for this movie, I'm going to give it 7 out of 10 because I think even though I have major problems with the conception of the movie and some of the conclusions of the movie, the images of this movie are sufficiently horrifying enough to give the viewer, a legitimate idea of what could happen in such an event. All right. If you like what I do, if you want to help me on my quest to becoming the most prolific reviewer of all time, please like this video, please comment, please subscribe to the channel. I don't need any of those to complete my mission, but it would make me help. It would make me feel that I'm, close to reaching my goal. My goal. So thank you. Bye-bye.